Welcome to the Focus on Why podcast. I'm Amy Rowlandson and I ask my guests one simple question. Why? Focusing on the importance of why, I share with you the relatable, uplifting and inspiring conversations I have with people from all walks of life. This podcast will encourage you to focus on your why to enable and empower you to achieve the success you desire. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. Before we start, I would like to draw your attention to what I can offer you as a master coach. I can help you to focus on your why with clarity, uniting your passion with your purpose with a plan to create the life you truly desire. Book a free 20-minute coaching call right now via calendly.com/Amy Rowlandson/call, and we can take it from there. Today on Focus on Why, I am joined by Alexis Kingsbury. Welcome.
Thanks very much for having me. Great to be here.
It is indeed. Well, at the time of recording, it is a very snowy, wintry day, and we're all cozy inside. I've got my Christmas jumper on, all ready for Christmas. Not that you can see my reindeer, but he's hiding down there somewhere.
There you go.
All good. So what is it we're talking about today? We're talking about purpose. And my first question is, what is it that you're doing at the moment, Alexis?
So right now, my time is focused on helping business leaders to free up their time, to reduce the stress, and as a result, create space to have a greater impact on themselves, but also their families, their relationships, and hopefully the wider world. I think that for entrepreneurs, for business owners, we don't go into it thinking really for the money. Yes, there's an expectation that you get financial freedom and be your own boss and all those sorts of things. But I think most entrepreneurs genuinely want to make a difference in the world, and that even if they earned, if they suddenly won the lottery, they'd still want to do what they're doing because it's all about having a greater impact on the people and helping people and so on. And so I think that's what I love with what I'm doing, is that there's so much that gets in the way of that for business owners, whether it's just day-to-day stuff or whether it's the stress and overwhelm, firefighting, all that kind of stuff in your business. And so we're all about how do you remove that stress? How do you remove that overwhelm? How do you make managing and running the business easy? And how do you free up the time for leadership to do so?
So most people who come on the show have formulated their business and their purpose around something that's personal to them. Is that the case for you?
Yeah, it is. I think over I think it's been 2 decades that I've been in business. I've worked on lots of different projects and got multiple businesses and still own 2 software businesses right now. But the purpose that I've just kind of talked about there really comes from a few places. So I guess deep history would go back to when I was a child and had 2 parents who were running their own businesses, and I, although incredibly inspiring and has clearly helped me to kind of go into entrepreneurship myself, and even when my stepfather came along, also owned a series of pharmacies. So I've been surrounded by people running their own businesses. So clearly that's something I'm passionate about and love that area of entrepreneurship and the passion around business and enjoying it. On the flip side, I remember quite a bit of my childhood where I felt like work came first, and that whilst I understood that at an intellectual level, like that, it's we've got to pay the bills and do all these sorts of things, I think that it did create various challenges in my family. It probably contributed to my parents' divorce. And certainly there were times in my life where I kind of felt like that pull was detrimental to my life at that point, and particularly my relationship with my parents. And so when I started my own businesses, one of the things that I was super passionate about was I don't want to have that experience for my children. I want to make sure that I create better balance for work life and all those sorts of things, and that I'm able to build my businesses in such a way that I'm always able to be there and do all the things that I want to with my children, and that I can make it to all of the nativities and all these such things, but also I can just be available in the evenings and the weekends, and making cakes for them and all these such things. And so I think that heavily sort of drove some of my passion for that work-life balance. That's not to say, although I started off with that, and in fact with my business partner Paddy as well, he's equally passionate about this, and we built our businesses with this in mind. That's not to say we got it perfect from the beginning. And there's been various points in our lives where we've got it wrong, and I think of one in particular about 12 years ago, where I was sat in bed on my laptop at 11 p.m. on a Friday, my soulmate lying next to me, and I'd been working, working loads because my other software business had not been kind of growing as fast as I'd like, and so on. I think it's a common experience for entrepreneurs that it's never as fast as you like. And we're dealing with some issues and so on. She asked, how much longer is this going to take? And I said, just a few minutes more, I offered. And then of course another issue pops up and it takes a bit longer and so on. And when I think back now, like, in that moment, I felt I was building our future for me, for my soulmate, for our potential future kids. I was building our future. What I didn't know, and found out later through a friend, was that she was planning to end our relationship. She was fed up with the late working, the evenings, the weekends, the sitting in bed working, and so on. Like, that was completely abhorrent to her, quite rightly. And as a result, that nearly was the end of my relationship with my soulmate. Now, fortunately, the friend told me, and I was able to make some significant changes in our lives. And I'm very glad to say that as a result, we stayed together and recently celebrated our 10-year wedding anniversary, and have got 2 wonderful children and moved into our dream home and so on. But I think back at that moment as something that I was oblivious to. I knew I was making a mistake, but I was oblivious to the enormity of the impact that it was having, and oblivious to what I could do differently that would change that. And I think that's the challenge, is, based on in my past, I was so passionate about avoiding this very situation, and yet was creating it in my day-to-day life. And so then there's been numerous other examples that I could draw upon, but those are some pretty major events in my life that have really contributed to that passion of helping others avoid that trap and make sure that they're able to spend time on what matters most.
And it's so interesting that you were planning for the future. It wasn't that you weren't doing something for you both. It was, you were in the future as opposed to being in the present. And it's very hard sometimes to explain that to someone else who doesn't get that vision or doesn't quite understand the compromises and the sacrifices you're making. But now that you know on what the impact is on other people, and you certainly spoke about it right at the beginning about how the relationships were affected as a child and growing up. What is it that you're building for your current family and for the future and for other people involved in your business?
Yeah, so I kind of think of that 2 ways. So one is that I make sure that, exactly as you said, like, I was focused on the future rather than the present. And so my first answer to the question, what am I building, is actually in real time building the present. Like, what is our day-to-day experience together? For me, some of my most important moments in my day are running with the children into school in the morning, like that, and having breakfast with them and so on, and being very involved in all of that. That is a very important time to me, and often, one of the highlights. And then when I think back of what was some of the highlights of my previous day or whatever, I'm thinking back to those moments. Same as having lunch with my wife. We now both work from home. Like, most of the time we have lunch together, and that's a really important thing for me. I plan around that and make sure that happens, and equally making sure I'm ending my day typically 5:30, not just letting it drag in to the evening, and instead making sure that I'm being very conscious in how I'm stopping, and then bringing the calm, because sometimes I can be frenetic after an exciting day at work. And so I make sure that the mental state I bring is into the family, bringing the calm and being present and lovely and supportive and helpful and so on with my family every single day. And of course I slip. Of course there are things that don't go as planned. But when we talk about what am I building, that on a daily basis is essentially building the future for a happy home life for me, but my wife and my children every single day. And so I think that's probably one of the most important things that I can do in terms of that circle, in terms of the impact that I have. I think more broadly, I think then when I then expand that circle and think about the wider world and what we're doing for entrepreneurs and business owners, it's going and speaking at events and being on fantastic podcasts like your own, and helping people using our process documentation software, and running webinars, and doing our own episodes on our podcast, De-Stress Your Business, all about how do you remove stress from the business. All of those things are designed to essentially build resources and guidance and tools that allow business owners to kind of build businesses whilst getting time with the people and so on that matter most, and being able to build it. And so I think I try and focus more on the present and what we're kind of building day to day. Long term, of course, I have goals and visions for what I'd like to create. I'd love to get to the point where our software for documented processes, Air Manual, I'd love to get to the point where business owners get that, yeah, I've got to document and delegate if I want to increase my impact and so on. I'd love it if they get that old ways of doing that don't work, and that they can use a much more lightweight approach that we provide. And I'd love it if we're the go-to solution, and the Air Manual is the go-to solution for doing that. And that's kind of our long-term vision. But often I find that although that's inspiring to me and helps me think about, the big questions and so on, fundamentally, sometimes it almost feels too lofty day to day. And so sometimes it's just tapping into just helping people is kind of what helps me, feel that sense of purpose each day and do the right activities.
And you just brought in that phrase, feel the sense of purpose. When did you understand the importance of purpose in your life and your work?
I think it's been an iterative approach to kind of understanding that impact of purpose. There are a few individual events where I've sensed it or got it on a deeper level, but it's not like one thing I like. I watched Simon Sinek find your, start with why and so on, and just suddenly went, oh yeah, now I get it. Like that is one example of a time when I went, oh yeah, no, okay, I get this and da. But every time I revisit this area, including through your own awesome podcast, it helps me understand it at a deeper level and really tap into it. And I think it's such a powerful exercise or endeavor, really, is to better understand your own purpose and the why. Like, some of the stories I've shared of why I have my own purpose, the why behind my why. Some of those are ones that I have uncovered like over time, and in fact, there are many others where I've kind of explored more deeply and gone, oh yeah, actually I didn't realize the impact that life event was having on me, and why I believe that, and why I put importance on the things that I do, and so on. And then equally, day to day, like I was talking to a business owner a couple of months ago, who by all accounts super successful. He'd gone from 18 staff to 42 staff in 18 months. The kind of growth that most business owners are like, oh my God, how can I do that? Like, how do I get that level of growth? But I could see it in his eyes. So I asked the question. I said, and are you enjoying it? And he said, no. And I find that heartbreaking, because to all intents and purposes, he's building a successful business that, that would be enviable. And yet he's not enjoying it because he's firefighting all the time. He's not spending time with his family. He's working evenings and weekends and can't see a way out. And I know other business owners who have either burnt out, or basically they wait until the business crashes, or they've had to end the business and start again because they're stuck in that situation. And so when I have those kinds of conversations, that really taps into that deeper purpose for me. It reignites that passion for wanting to help people out of that pain. Because, another example, meeting a couple of business owners of a web design agency, husband and wife running it together. And when I first met them, they hadn't taken a holiday in the 5 years that they'd been running the business. They hadn't been able to because they were required as part of day to day. Now, I don't know many people in relationships in the long term that are able to go that full tilt and stay together. And so for me, tapping into my family background, like for me, that's terrifying to me. Like the idea that it's not about the love that they share or anything. Is just about their ability to take a break and relax and just be with each other in a way that isn't work focused is so important. And yet they hadn't got it for 5 years up to that point. And yet what's crazy is when we work with business owners like that, we're able relatively quickly to get them to a point where they can free up enough time and remove the key person dependency and so on, so that they can at least take a week or 2 or 3 out of the business. That's not that hard. And yet I see so many business owners in that exact situation. The other business owner mentioned, working 7 days a week, like literally 2-3 calls with us, and we managed to get them to a point where he was saving 10 hours, 15 hours a week, so 2 days a week, basically getting his weekend back. Like, it doesn't require that much to get to that point. And yet I think partly people don't know that that's possible. I think partly that they assume they overestimate the amount of work it'll take and underestimate the results they can get, but also I think they're just too stuck in it. And I think that's one of the things that I find most harrowing, and again, tapping into that purpose for me is having those conversations and knowing that they are not only feeling pain, but don't see the way out. And that gives me that great sense of purpose, because regardless of whether I help them directly or not, shining a spotlight on the fact that it's possible to get out is hugely inspiring and important. And so I think that helps me build on my understanding of why each time.
When you're helping people to free up the time, do they know what to do with that time? Or is it again?
That is such a great question. I love that, because I think if you'd asked me even 6 months ago, I'd have said, I think emotionally I'd have felt like, yes, like they get it. They get that they want to spend, and if you ask them, like, where do you want to be spending your time? Generally, people are pretty quick to come up with the answers of, oh, I want to spend more time with my family, or I know I need to look after my health, or I'd like to be spending more time on personal development, or building my business, working on it rather than in it, all of those sorts of things. However, having spoken to even customers of ours, I know that one of the fears they have is that when we help them free up their time, that they won't know what to do with it. Like this, but then what? Like, yeah, okay, so I'm going to reduce my time on low value adding tasks, but I worry that then either it'll just get filled with more low value stuff, or I won't know what to do. And it's irrational, of course, because somehow we all find the ability to fill our time. Like, if there's the one thing that you can be sure of, like particularly running a business, there'll be other stuff that fills the time. But you do have to be intentional with it. And I think that's one of the things that we've been doing more recently, is not just saying, okay, what do you need to let go of? Like, what are the tasks that you're doing in your business that you shouldn't be doing? Or what's taking the most amount of time? What's causing you the most pain? Because our number one core value is focus on impact. So we're always asking those sorts of questions to understand what's going to be the impact that we have. But the thing that we've now added is and where do you want to be spending your time, and increasingly finding ways in which we can get them to commit to that. So one particular customer, Adam Bonner at Convertico, I remember talking to him, and he voiced that, like, he's awesome because he's so open and very dialed in and self-aware. And so he just shared, like, my fear is that I won't spend the time that I free up on the right things. And so we had that conversation over, like, so where do you want to spend the time? For him, it was personal development. He says, I know I need to be spending more time on personal development. If I want a better business, I need to be a better business owner. Therefore, that's what I want to spend the time. And so we talked about, okay, so how can you schedule that in advance? How can we make sure that starts to displace the other work? And rather fortunately, that week he happened to be on a retreat, so that it was easy for that week. But for subsequent weeks, like, how are you going to make sure that time gets blocked out? And I think that then that got easier intellectually, because then it's kind of in your calendar and so on. And I think that's a useful thing to do, whatever where you would like to be spending your time. If it's spending more time with the family, how are you going to do that? When are you going to do that? Because there's no use, like, let's say that we free up 10 hours a week and you say, yeah, I really want to spend more time with my family. But let's say that the time that we free up is during school hours. And as a result, it's like, well, the kids are at school, my partner's at work. Like, how am I going to do that? And of course, what happens is you just fill it with something else and it doesn't happen. So it's about then being very intentional and using time blocking and so on to say, okay, I'm always going to finish work at X, or that's my default, and I no longer work weekends and so on. And what am I going to do with my family instead? Are we, is there an activity we're going to do together, or is it very freeform? And how's that work? And but being intentional with it to make sure that those high value activities, those activities that have the greatest impact, that matter most, displace the others. Because otherwise the reverse will be true.
And you've mentioned impact alongside the freeing up the time and the reducing the stress. What does impact actually mean for you, Alexis?
Yeah, so I think for me, when I talk about the impact that we have, I'm thinking about business owners and their time with their family and all these sorts of things. But then I guess the next order impact is, I know that other entrepreneurs have their own whys, their own purposes, their own things that are important to them, whether it's business owners who perhaps work with female leaders, and they want to support them in having enriching careers and addressing inequality and so on. I'm thinking one of our clients, Jacqueline at Elevate Talent, does amazing things with helping corporates, but also female career people in doing, living their best selves and doing all those things. And that's because Jacqueline is incredibly passionate about why that's important and the impact that it can have, both for the individual, but also for corporates, and of course, being role models for our daughters. I have a 6-year-old daughter. Like, I think that's incredibly important. I have to pick my purposes. I can't do 1,000, otherwise I would. But I love the fact that that's something that Jacqueline is day to day is like improving the world through. And so when we help her to reduce her time spent on sales and marketing, I know that the time gets replaced with her being able to deliver more and being able to help more organizations and more individuals to have a greater impact, as demonstrated by the fact that in the last year she grew her revenue not only more than she had ever grown it, but more than anyone else in the mastermind group that she's part of, and so as a result got an award for it. But that revenue, great, money is great, but really money is just a quantifiable measure of the value you create, the impact that you have. Generally, people will pay you when you create value and have an impact. And so, that's a great example of what she's done there is massively increase her ability to help more people and have a greater impact and all that sort of thing. So that's just one example. Like, another thing that I'm really passionate about is environmental concerns, and so I love the fact that we work with businesses who work on renewable energies and helping organizations and homes and so on to be more energy efficient and all these sorts of things. Like, though each of those business owners has their own reasons for why that's something that they're super passionate about, and so and that they want to have a greater impact. They want to not just help one or two companies to be slightly more cost efficient or whatever, energy efficient. It's like no, they fundamentally want to make the world of work and organizations and warehouses and whatever it is, like that particular area, have a more like negative or at least neutral impact on the environment. And what an incredible, important thing to do. And I love the fact that, and so the thing that fires me up is that it's like, yeah, we can support that. Like by helping entrepreneurs, we can help unlock 1,000 purposes out there, and the impact that people have.
And you mentioned it just a moment ago that you feel you have to pick a purpose or pick your purpose, and that by doing the work you're doing, you're almost by default not having to pick one. You are able to work with many. But do you feel you have to pick a purpose, or do you feel the purpose picks you?
Oh, what a really interesting question. So you're right that I'm cheating, aren't I? I'm cheating by like saying, there are so many things that I feel passionately about. And then I've found a way, which is so very me, to find a way to do everything. Right? I appreciate at an intellectual level, like you're meant to niche, you're meant to specialize, you're meant to focus and and yeah, it's so great. It's against everything that is me. Like I like doing a bit of everything and so on. So yeah, you've caught me out there. But I think you're right about the purpose picks you. I think it's Tony Robbins who talks about like how you are essentially fully formed in your or maybe it's Simon Sinek and so on, like, but I've definitely heard it from multiple people actually, that a lot of those inbuilt whys, the things that make you are kind of there until by the time you're about sort of 15, 16, right? And so those life lessons, those parts of your history, those experiences, I believe, form like some of the things that you're passionate about. And so I think that to some extent it then does pick you, in the sense that it's difficult to shape that. And there's various forms. I know some people who are and one in particular I have in mind, who is driven to create amazing things in their business, largely when you tap into it, to prove their family wrong and to prove their school teachers who thought they were an idiot and all this kind of stuff wrong. Now sadly, that's a sad source of a purpose, and perhaps not a particularly healthy sort of motivator. But that purpose has kind of picked them, right? Like it's in their situation, they've created amazing things, and I know that they've only recently tapped into the why behind the why. Like why is that? Why have they been doing those things? I think that the most powerful why is your purpose, and that motivation come from when it's externally focused. I think you're right. I think that, as you say, like, is it that your purpose picks you? I think it does. But at the same time, if you're motivated by something that is essentially selfishly driven, so for example, a selfish example for me would be like, oh, well, I want to make sure that I get to have more free time, and better work-life balance, so that I get more free time and can have fun. The problem with that is because it's quite self-centered and focused. It means that even when I'm doing it, it may feel quite hollow. So if I'm then playing computer games or whatever it is during that free time that I've been pursuing, it won't have much meaning for me. I think it's I saw in an interview between Stephen Bartlett and Simon Sinek. They're talking about Olympians and how one of the challenges for them is once they achieve that gold, the Olympics or whatever, it feels pretty hollow, because ultimately it was a selfish goal of, I want to be the best at this. And even though there might be some, oh yeah, I get to inspire people, that's a byproduct, really. That's not why they were doing it. There are other ways in which they could inspire people to achieve great things rather than through their own personal accomplishment. And so I think that when you're tapping into that purpose, it really needs to be more externally focused about what you're doing for other people, and then you find it more motivating. So I think it's true that your purpose finds you because of your history, but I think it's important that you then hone it, particularly to make it more positively focused, and particularly to make it more externally focused on other people rather than yourself. Otherwise, I think it fails to motivate for the long term, and ultimately can lead to unhappiness.
So you've got young children, and you spoke earlier about how those moments with them at the beginning and end of the day particularly are very special to you. What are you sharing with them about purpose?
Oh yeah, it's one of the things I love most, actually, is those little moments where one of my children will ask a question or make an observation or something, and I almost have to contain my enthusiasm for, like, oh, here's a teachable moment. Like, I remember one in particular while we're walking to school, and or skateboarding to school, actually, more accurately. And my son said, "Daddy, Sasha wants to be good at roller skating, but she's not willing to practice, is she? Like, she's." And I thought, oh, what an amazing day! And so we talked about how often people want the result but aren't willing to put in the effort and the hours and so on to get it. And it was so interesting, like, being able to kind of explore that with him. So I think in terms of purpose, some of the things that I guess we do is firstly, we're always looking for what is it that they're passionate about or enjoying, whether it's a cause or whatever, and really dial into that. And so for my daughter, she's super passionate about environmental concerns and so on. And so's my son, but my daughter, to the point that she's got elected to the Eco Council. Again, she's 6. She got elected to the Eco Council at school and petitioned and spoke at the Parents Association meeting to petition that they no longer sell the plastic tat at events. The sorts of things, the sort of little plastic, like, foam light up swords that the kids just go and hit each other with anyway, and then all end up in the dustbin because they break within about 20 minutes. And all, just landfill, right? And so I love the fact that she's super passionate about that, and so we support and nurture that wherever we can. And for my son, he's particularly passionate about animals, to the point that he'll get upset if we literally, like, kill a spider or a fly in the house. Like, for him, it's no, that needs to be taken outside, and so on. And so I love that that's something that he is personally passionate about, and we nurture. One of the other things that we're increasingly doing, I think that they would have been a little bit, maybe I'm wrong, but I think they would have been a little bit too young to appreciate if we'd done it a little bit earlier. But starting to look at human charitable causes, and not only the money you can contribute, but the time that you can contribute and what you can do. And so particularly looking at this Christmas, and we're already sort of more planning for subsequent Christmases, like, what can we do that means that the kids get an opportunity to help others and see the impact that they can have for others, and get addicted to that, like, get addicted to the value you can add to other people and the impact that you can have. And I think giving people an opportunity to do that, whether it's your children or whoever, I think is a great gift. It's because once you've started doing it, it's that incredible feeling of having done something for other people is hard to give up. And it's a good thing not to give up, as long as you're not doing it to the detriment of others. I think it's a great thing to do. And so I think that's something that we've not been great at, but it's something that we're putting more focus on now.
And it's funny you mentioned getting addicted to the value that you add in purpose, because here I am with this podcast. I started it back in April 2020, just thinking that it was something that people needed at the time during a lockdown, and it was an extension of my life purpose coaching work. I am totally addicted to this. Hearing people's stories, hearing people share why they do what they do, why they are who they are, and how purpose has this incredible way of affecting so many people, and the ripple effect that it then goes on to. So no, you're not cheating. you've found a fantastic way to use your work and also provide for you that incredible purpose. So I think it's great that you found a way to have an impact with many people's different whys. It's because I'm the same. That's what I'm doing here, sharing the messages across the platform. So for me to shine the light on purpose and people's purpose, that's it. And absolutely, it doesn't matter, because we are championing so many different causes in the work that we do. So yeah, I salute you. I don't think it's a cheat at all.
Thank you. Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And particularly, it's so much easier to see it when you see it for someone else's. Like I look at you in that situation, like what you're doing and helping people to more powerfully tap into their own purpose so that they can live it, not only for their own benefit, although that's awesome, but for others and the greater impact that they can have. So yeah, no, you're right. We're not cheaters. We're just creating more ripples, which is a really, really powerful thing to do.
And also, when it's funny, because when I say to people that we're going to record and you came on the show, and you can start to see people thinking more about the purpose in their work. And then conversations I've had after we've had these recordings with people on the podcast before has been, oh my goodness, you don't realize quite how much more purpose is now affecting my work and my life. It's been really insightful having this conversation, because it has instigated the thought process and the doing from that even more so.
Yeah, no, I agree, and already and feel it myself, right? Like every time I talk about it, because to some extent, I think a lot of people don't talk about the purpose as part of their work. You know, when people meet each other at events, you know, what do you do? And people often don't lead with purpose. Even myself, I tend to be pretty dialed into purpose and will be quite quick to talk about the impact that we have. However, I'll tend to start off with, I run a, someone says, what do you do? I run a couple of software businesses. And I think it's it's a funny one, because on the flip side, we say, oh, well, you should really talk about the impact that you have. But sometimes it can feel a bit odd if you say, oh, what do you do? And it's, oh, I help people to free up their time to spend it on what matters most. And the other person can kind of be left feeling, going like, sorry, how? Like, and particularly if you then end up going like, oh, I'm an accountant, like, oh, well, lead with that then, so I can work out how you are. And I think that's the tough thing. I think that often we don't have those conversations about impact and purpose. Instead, we talk about more the tactical how things are done rather than the why. And I think we even shy away from asking the questions because we know that there's a risk that you're touching a nerve. Like, even, I've shared a few stories that are incredibly personal to me and my relationships and my history. And so there's a risk, of course, that you have that conversation with some people and say, oh, you're helping this particular, in this particular area. Why is that? Like, if you ask enough, it's entirely possible that they weren't aware of a deeper why. They tap into it. You could have someone literally bawling in front of you just because you're kind of tapping into that conversation. And so I think, as you say, like, the power of having that conversation and delving deep is significant. It's funny, actually, like, you asked the question earlier about like how am I helping my kids with purpose. My daughter, a little while ago, she hasn't repicked it up since, and I'm not putting the pressure on, but she said like, oh, how do I start a business? And of course I'm like, right, calm my enthusiasm, I don't want to scare her off. But like, I thought, right, okay, now is the time. How for I think it was probably within the last 12 months, so she was 6. How do I teach a 6-year-old on how to start a business? And I thought, right, first it's tapping into the why. So I thought, right, we're going to, so first it's about defining your values, what matters. So because your business may change over time, but what does matter is like how you do it and what you believe in. And it was incredible. Like, straight off the bat, she rattled off 3 values and then just quickly reordered them. Just like, it's this. I was like, okay, great. And in that order, she's like, no, the 3rd one first. Okay, wow. And then I said, okay, so now you've defined like how you do business and what matters to you in terms of the way you do it. Who do you want to help and what do you want to help them to do? because I know from my experience, particularly many failed attempts of growing businesses, that if you start with the product idea or the service idea, it's so much harder. It's way more effective if you start with a target customer group and what you want, the pain you want to help them solve, like the problem you want to solve, because then you find the product, the solution, whatever it is, and then you've got a market. Whereas if you start with the product or service, and then you're kind of finding your market and you can't quite articulate it in terms of values and so on. So I started off with, who do you want to help and what do you want to help them to do? And I can't share what she said because it was so funny. She said, but you can't tell mummy and my brother. It's like, oh, okay. She said, no, you can't even tell them, like, you can't tell them anything. I said, oh, so well, you've got me under NDA then. And she's like, what's NDA? And so I ended up explaining to a 6-year-old what a non-disclosure agreement is. And she's like, yes, love this, love this. And so like, at other points, she's like, you can't tell mummy because of NPA. It's like NDA, you can't tell mummy, NDA. But like how quickly she just tapped into, this is who I want to help and this is what I want to help them to do, was just amazing. And I think, so in terms of for others, that's what you can do. If you want to help other people and children, whoever it is, if you want to help them to live with greater purpose and build businesses and all these sorts of things, I think, there's the charity side, there's the supporting the greater cause, the greater good, what you want to do. But then if you're thinking more tactically and strategically about like a business, I think just starting with okay, who do you want to help? What do you want to help them to do? What's the problem you want to help them to solve? I think it's so powerful as an approach.
I think you should write it down and put it in an envelope somewhere, because I almost guarantee that when she gets older, she will be doing that same thing. Because quite often, so many people forget about what matters most to them as they get distracted in life as they grow up. And then when they start to tap into things, and I see this a lot with the sort of midlifers I work with, they're coming back to things that mattered most to them when they were younger and have just been sitting there under the surface and been battered away for whatever reason. And you were talking earlier about the impact, you're talking about building the present and bringing the calm, and then it was really lovely, again, just saying calming the enthusiasm but building the future, all these little phrases that you've got here. And then it's like, start with pain. I mean, I didn't call the podcast Start With Pain, but it's almost the same as Focus on Why. It really is on that, and it wouldn't have the same impact if this podcast was called Focus on How or Focus on What. It has to be Focus on Why. It's the why behind everything that you're doing. Alexis, I've loved this conversation. It's been fantastic. I really, really enjoyed it. Thank you for sharing so many things. And I really look forward to my reflections episode where I can pick on different threads and really dive deeper into them in my solo episode later. So tell me, how could people get in contact with you?
Yeah, I love that. Well, firstly, thank you, and completely agree with what you just said and the power of what you're doing, and love what you're doing. So that's awesome. In terms of get in contact, so highly recommend people check out our podcast, which is De-Stress Your Business. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts, or you can go to destressyourbusiness.com, where you've got the kind of video versions of me and my business partner talking deeply about the how around how do you do some of these things, with some really tactical guidance and links to templates and checklists and all that kind of stuff, because we're big into breaking things down and make it easy. But other ways to reach out is find me on social media, Alexis Kingsbury. There aren't many of me, and those that there are typically female. So seek out the male one that is a co-founder of Air Manual, and you'll find me. And then people can email me, alexis.kingsbury@airmanual.co. They can reach out with those questions, and then we've got loads of resources, like on some of the things that I've talked about. We run I run regular webinars, we've got the podcast, we've got ebooks, we've got all sorts of resources that are available at airmanual.co, where you can kind of get all of those, because ultimately, as I say, we've talked about my passion and what we can do, and even for my purpose that I read nearly every day and remind myself of and tap into, is that I'm all about sort of providing the resources and the guidance and the tools and so on, so that people can free up their time and reduce the mistakes and reduce the stress and grow the business and so on, to have a greater impact. And it's like the more that we can do to do that, the better. So yeah, please encourage people to reach out, get in contact, follow what I'm doing, and hopefully help them get those results.
Amazing. Well, all those links will be in the show notes, so everyone can get hold of you really easily. So thank you. Alexis, thank you so much for sharing why you do what you do, why you are who you are, and your focus on why. Do you have some final words for the audience, please?
I think my final words would be, make sure that you're spending time on what matters most.
How has this conversation had an impact on you? What value have you received from tuning in? What are your reflections with actions? Please take a moment to leave me an Apple Podcast or Spotify review sharing how Focus on Why has made a difference to you today. Remember, the conversation doesn't end here. To keep it going, simply connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook or Twitter, or join the Focus on Why Facebook group. All the links are in the show notes. Have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why.